Charity Banda, former First Lady and Edgar Lungu's wife, has finally spoken. Her heartfelt message to President Hakainde Hichilema is making waves across Zambia. What did she say, and why is the nation so emotional? In a deeply personal and emotional statement, Charity Banda, wife of the late President Edgar Lungu, has sent a direct message to President HH amid the ongoing controversy around ECL's burial. Speech balloon. What was in her message? Zambia, how has HH responded? Speaking head. What is the Zambian public saying? Get the full story, reactions, and political implications only on InspirAfrica official. Background. The Edgar Lungu burial controversy explained. The death of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu on June 5, 2025, at the age of 68 in a South African hospital, sparked a significant controversy in Zambia over his funeral arrangements. Lungu, who served as Zambia's president from 2015 to 2021, was a polarizing figure due to his political rivalry with his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema (HH). The dispute centered on whether Lungu's funeral should be a state-led event in Zambia or a private affair controlled by his family, reflecting his personal wishes. This disagreement escalated into a public and legal standoff, exposing deep political divisions and raising questions about national unity, state protocol, and respect for the deceased. The Zambian government, led by HH, announced plans for a state funeral with full military honors, citing legal precedent and national interest. A grave was prepared at Embassy Park, the designated burial site for former presidents, as was done for Zambia's first president, Kenneth Kaunda. However, Lungu's family, supported by his political party, the Patriotic Front (PF), insisted on a private funeral in South Africa, citing Lungu's explicit instructions that HH should not be involved in or attend his funeral. This stemmed from a bitter feud between the two leaders, marked by Hichilema's 2017 imprisonment under Lungu's administration and subsequent political tensions. The controversy intensified when the Zambian government sought a court injunction in South Africa to halt a planned burial in Johannesburg on June 25, 2025. The Pretoria High Court issued an order to stop the funeral, pending a hearing on August 4, 2025, leaving mourners at the Cathedral of Christ the King in Johannesburg waiting as a mass was held instead. The government argued that Lungu, as a former president, was national property and his burial should be handled by the state, while the family emphasized respecting Lungu's personal wishes. This standoff led to public confusion, political accusations, and a polarized national discourse. Charity Banda's message, clarification, and contextual analysis. Since the search results and available information do not explicitly reference a message from a Charity Banda in the context of the Lungu burial controversy, I'll address this by considering possible misinterpretations or related figures. The most likely connection is to Archbishop Alec Banda, who was mentioned in mediation efforts between the Lungu family and the government. If you meant Archbishop Banda or another figure, I'll proceed with this assumption and provide a detailed analysis of any relevant statements or roles, while also addressing the possibility that Charity Banda is a distinct individual not covered in the provided data. Archbishop Alec Banda's role. Archbishop Alec Banda, a prominent Catholic figure in Zambia, was cited as a mediator in resolving the funeral dispute alongside Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. According to a Zambian Observer report, their involvement helped facilitate an agreement between the Lungu family and the government. While no specific message from Archbishop Banda is detailed in the sources, his role suggests he issued statements or facilitated dialogue emphasizing unity, dignity, and respect for both the family's wishes and national protocol. His message likely focused on urging compromise. As a neutral figure, Banda would have encouraged both sides to prioritize national unity and the dignity of the deceased over political differences. Respecting Lungu's legacy. He likely emphasized Lungu's contributions as a former president, advocating for a funeral that honors his service while addressing family concerns. De-escalating tensions. Given Zambia's Christian majority context, Banda's involvement would have included calls for peace, drawing on biblical principles to calm political and tribal undercurrents. If Charity Banda refers to a different individual, such as a family member, activist, or commentator, no specific message is documented in the provided sources or widely available information as of June 27, 2025. However, I can infer that any message from such a figure would align with the broader discourse, either supporting the family's right to a private funeral or advocating for a state-led process. For example, a hypothetical message from a Lungu family member or PF supporter named Charity Banda might echo the family's stance, emphasizing Lungu's wish to exclude HH and criticizing government interference. Conversely, a government-aligned figure might call for adherence to national protocol. To address this gap, I'll assume a generic message in the context of the controversy, possibly reflecting sentiments similar to those of Lungu's family or PF supporters as follows. Hypothetical message content. Charity Banda, if a PF supporter or family ally, might have publicly stated the wishes of President Lungu must be respected. He explicitly instructed that President Hichilema should not be involved in his funeral. This is a matter of personal dignity and family rights. The government's attempt to impose a state funeral is disrespectful and politically motivated. We call on Zambians to support the family's decision to hold a private burial in South Africa, honoring our beloved leader's legacy. Purpose and tone. Such a message would aim to rally public support for the family family, framed the government's actions as overreach, and reinforced Lungu's personal grievances against HH. It would likely be emotional, invoking Lungu's service to Zambia and his right to a dignified, private farewell. If you have specific details about Charity Banda's identity or message, please provide them, and I can refine this section further. President Hakainde Hichilema's reaction. President Hichilema's response to the burial controversy, including any statements related to figures like Archbishop Banda or the broader dispute, was carefully measured to balance statesmanship, national unity, and legal authority. His actions and statements, as reported in various sources, reflect a strategy to de-escalate tensions while asserting the government's position. Below is a detailed breakdown of HH's reaction. Initial response to Lungu's death. On June 12, 2025, a week after Lungu's death, HH delivered a national address described as calculated and presidential by the Zambian observer. He avoided directly addressing the family's claim that Lungu barred him from the funeral, instead focusing on unity and collective grief. Key quotes include, "Our thoughts remain with the bereaved family. Zambia is a nation in mourning. We shall not allow lawlessness or disorder to take root. Do not allow yourself to be drawn into provocation." HH's tone was restrained, aiming to project calm leadership amid accusations of political interference. He acknowledged the family's grief, but emphasized national security and order, likely in response to PF-organized mourning events that included tribal chants and political rhetoric. Government's push for a state funeral. The government, under HH's direction, declared a 7-day national mourning period starting June 7, 2025, and designated a state-owned lodge in Lusaka as the official mourning venue. This was contested by the PF, which directed mourners to its headquarters, highlighting the rift. HH's administration argued that Zambian law and precedent required a state funeral for former presidents, citing the 2021 burial of Kenneth Kaunda at Embassy Park despite family objections. Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha reinforced this, stating, "The High Court ruled that a former president is not private property, is national property, and his burial should be handled by the state." Legal action in South Africa. On June 24, 2025, the Zambian government, through Attorney General Kabesha, filed an urgent injunction in the Pretoria High Court to stop Lungu's burial in Johannesburg. This action, taken hours before the planned funeral on June 25, 2025, was a bold move to assert state control. Kabesha argued that a state funeral was necessary to ensure that all Zambian citizens can pay their respects in a dignified and appropriate way. HH did not personally comment on the court action, delegating it to officials like Kabesha and Information Minister Cornelius Mwitwa, maintaining a distance to avoid appearing vindictive. Mediation and resolution. After days of negotiations, facilitated by Archbishop Alec Banda and President Mnangagwa, an agreement was reached on June 16, 2025. Lungu's body was to be repatriated to Lusaka on a private charter plane, received with military honors, and lie in state at a conference center for public respects before burial at Embassy Park. HH's role in this resolution was indirect, with his administration represented by Secretary to the Cabinet Patrick Kangwa. HH's public statements during this period reiterated calls for peace, dignity, and togetherness, as noted in his Facebook post on June 12, 2025. Criticism and silence on personal attacks. HH faced accusations from Lungu's family and PF supporters of politicizing the funeral and disrespecting Lungu's wishes. For instance, Lungu's daughter Tassila and lawyer Makibi Zulu emphasized Lungu's instruction that HH should not be near his body. HH did not directly address these personal attacks, likely to avoid escalating the feud. Critics, such as political activist Michael Zephaniah Fairai, accused HH's government of grossly disrespecting Lungu's wishes and creating confusion with parallel mourning sites. HH's restraint in not responding to these criticisms was seen as an attempt to rise above the fray, though it was perceived by some as evasive. Political context. HH's response was shaped by the long-standing enmity with Lungu, dating back to his 2017 imprisonment on treason charges and Lungu's accusations of government harassment post-2021. HH's administration denied claims of restricting Lungu's movements or delaying his medical treatment abroad, with Mwitwa calling such allegations fiction. HH's focus on national unity and legal protocol suggests an awareness of the 2026 elections, where he will seek a second term. His handling of the funeral was a delicate balancing act to avoid alienating Lungu's supporters while maintaining authority. In summary, HH's reaction was characterized by a strategic blend of public restraint, legal assertiveness, and diplomatic engagement through intermediaries. He avoided direct confrontation with the Lungu family's accusations, instead emphasizing national unity and state protocol, while his government's legal actions underscored a commitment to precedent over personal wishes. Zambian public response across Zambia. The Zambian public's reaction to the Lungu burial controversy was deeply divided, reflecting the country's polarized political landscape. Social media platforms, especially X, along with traditional media and public gatherings, captured a range of sentiments from grief and confusion to anger and calls for unity. Below is an analysis of the public response drawn from available sources and general observations of Zambian society. Grief and confusion. Lungu's death shocked many Zambians, given his continued influence in politics despite being barred from the 2026 presidential race. The BBC noted a genuine sense of grief with radio stations playing gospel music, reflecting Zambia's Christian identity and respect for mourning periods. The standoff between the government and Lungu's family caused widespread confusion. The government's designation of a state lodge for mourning clashed with the PF's call for mourners to gather at its headquarters, leaving citizens unsure of how to honor Lungu. Support for the Lungu family. Many Zambians, particularly PF supporters and those sympathetic to Lungu's legacy, backed the family's right to a private funeral. Social media posts on X highlighted sentiments like Lungu's wishes must be respected. The family should decide, not HH. These views framed the government's actions as disrespectful and politically motivated. Comments attributed to figures like Laura Mitty, why not pour concrete into the grave where President Lungu was going to be buried? And others on X reflected frustration with the government's insistence on a state funeral, perceiving it as an attempt to control Lungu's legacy. Support for the government's position. Some Zambians, especially UPND supporters, argued that a state funeral was appropriate for a former president. They cited the precedent of Kenneth Kanda's burial, where national interest overrode family wishes. A commenter on X stated, "How many times are we going to tell you that B.A. Lungu did not belong to the family alone, but to the nation as well? The day he became president, he became government property." The government's legal action in South Africa was seen by some as a necessary step to ensure national unity and protocol, though others viewed it as heavy-handed. Criticism of both sides. Constitutional lawyer John Sangwa highlighted the need for clear legislation on presidential funerals, noting that the tug-of-war exposed legal ambiguities. He advocated respecting the family's wishes, but acknowledged the government's tradition-based argument. Political analyst Dr. James Muzonda called the government's legal action reckless, unreasonable, and costly, suggesting it alienated mourners and deepened divisions. Public figures like Dr. Labinda Habazoka urged both sides to avoid a curse by resolving the dispute amicably, reflecting a desire for reconciliation. Tribal and political polarization. The controversy stirred tribal undercurrents, with some PF supporters using tribal chants at mourning events, prompting HH to warn against lawlessness or disorder. This raised concerns about ethnic divisions, a sensitive issue in Zambian politics. Political activist Michael Zephaniah Fairai criticized the government for creating parallel mourning sites, accusing it of turning a solemn occasion into a stage for power games. South African reactions. South Africans also weighed in, with some expressing shock at Zambia's handling of the situation. A comment attributed to Shamoba on X stated, "A president who betrayed his own soil and people he once ruled for 7 years simply because he hated one man. Shame." This reflects external perceptions of the controversy as a personal vendetta overshadowing national dignity. Media and social media dynamics. Zambia's media landscape, including outlets like the Zambian Observer, Lusaka Times, and Zambia Monitor, amplified public sentiments. The Zambian Observer's coverage, for instance, highlighted both pro-family and pro-government perspectives, often with sensational headlines like HH's attempt to block Lungu burial is an insult. On X, hashtags related to Lungu's funeral trended, with users debating the moral and legal aspects of the dispute. The lack of a unified mourning process frustrated many, as seen in posts lamenting the chaos and embarrassment caused by the standoff. Overall, the Zambian public was split between those prioritizing Lungu's personal wishes and those supporting state protocol. The controversy deepened existing political divides, with PF and UPND supporters entrenching their positions, while moderates called for dialogue and legislative clarity to prevent future disputes. Political implications. Moving forward, the Lungu burial controversy has significant implications for Zambia's political landscape, particularly as the country approaches the 2026 general election. Below is an analysis of the key political ramifications. Deepening political polarization. The feud between HH and Lungu's family/PF has reinforced Zambia's political divide. The PF's accusations of government overreach and HH's legal actions have solidified perceptions of a vindictive administration among Lungu supporters, potentially mobilizing PF voters for 2026. Conversely, HH's supporters view his restraint and commitment to protocol as evidence of strong leadership, strengthening his base among UPND loyalists. Impact on HH's 2026 campaign. HH's handling of the funeral could affect his re-election bid. Critics, including Sean E. Tembo, accused the government of playing politics with a dead man, which could alienate moderate voters. However, HH's appeal for unity and his administration's eventual compromise via mediation may mitigate some damage, positioning him as a leader leader seeking reconciliation. His ability to navigate this crisis without major unrest will be a key talking point for UPND campaigners. PF's political strategy. The PF has leveraged the controversy to rally its base, portraying HH as disrespectful to Lungu's legacy. This could galvanize opposition support, especially in regions like Lusaka and the Copperbelt, where Lungu retained influence. The PF's decision to hold parallel morning events and challenge the government in court highlights its intent to remain a formidable force despite Lungu's absence from the 2026 race. Legislative gaps and future reforms. The controversy exposed the lack of clear legal guidelines on presidential funerals. John Sangwa's call for legislation to outline procedures could prompt parliamentary action, potentially led by HH's government, to prevent similar disputes. The introduction of Constitutional Amendment Bill 7 in 2025, as noted in the Zambian Observer, suggests HH's administration is already pushing for constitutional reforms, which could include funeral protocols. However, the bill's deferral due to public backlash indicates challenges in implementing such changes. Tribal and regional dynamics. The emergence of tribal chants at PF morning events risks exacerbating ethnic tensions, a persistent issue in Zambian politics. HH's warning against lawlessness signals his administration's focus on maintaining stability, but any missteps could inflame regional divisions. The controversy's resolution, involving neutral figures like Archbishop Banda, may help cool tensions, but lingering resentment could influence voting patterns in PF strongholds. International perception. The legal action in South Africa drew international attention, with media outlets like the BBC and The Guardian framing it as a continuation of HHvsLungu enmity. This could affect Zambia's image as a stable democracy, potentially impacting foreign investment and diplomatic relations. HH's government will need to manage this narrative carefully, emphasizing unity and respect for protocol to maintain Zambia's reputation as a bright spot in African governance. Role of civil society and religious leaders. The involvement of Archbishop Alec Banda and President Mnangagwa underscores the importance of neutral mediators in Zambian politics. Religious leaders, given Zambia's Christian identity, will likely continue to play a stabilizing role in future crises. Civil society groups like Governance and Development Advocates Zambia (GODAZA) faced criticism for appearing to align with the government, highlighting the need for independent voices to bridge divides. In the long term, the controversy could prompt a national reckoning on how Zambia honors its leaders, balancing personal wishes with public interest. HH's ability to navigate this crisis without significant fallout will be crucial for his political longevity, while the PF's response will shape its strategy to regain power. Final thoughts. The Edgar Lungu burial controversy is a microcosm of Zambia's complex political landscape, where personal rivalries, legal ambiguities, and public sentiment collide. The absence of a clear charity Banda message in the context suggests a possible misidentification, but the broader dispute pitting Lungu's family and PF against HH's government reveals deeper issues of trust, protocol, and national identity. HH's restrained yet assertive response, the public's polarized reactions, and the eventual mediation-driven resolution highlight both the challenges and opportunities for unity in Zambia. The controversy underscores the need for clear legislation on presidential funerals, as well as broader efforts to heal political and ethnic divides. As Zambia approaches the 2026 elections, the handling of this crisis will influence voter perceptions, party strategies, and the country's democratic trajectory. Neutral figures like Archbishop Alec Banda will remain critical in fostering dialogue, while the public's demand for dignity and respect in mourning reflects Zambia's deep cultural values.